Now I want to tell you about this whole idea of language. So Fred and I, that's my husband, and we went to Cali, Colombia on mission. Now Cali, which is in South America, northern South America, is a Spanish-speaking country. Now Fred is quite fluent in Spanish. Me, on the other hand, I know a little Spanish, like enough to say "Como se dice" and tell me what the word is, right? So we get there, and I understand now why they say if you want to learn a language, you need to go somewhere where you're submersed in the language, because guess what? They don't know English, and I didn't really know Spanish. So here I'm trying to speak in my native language of English, and they're speaking to me in their native language of Spanish, and we know speaky very well because neither of us are understanding each other really well, okay? That is the same exact thing that happens when it comes to the language of love. Because you have a primary love language, and the people who are most important in your life also have a primary love language. And most often, they are not the same. So if you find yourself in a situation, be it with your spouse, your child, your mom or dad, or a friend, and you feel like, I'm trying to show you that I love you, and it's as though they're not receiving it well, or they keep telling you, I don't feel very loved, it could very well be because of that language barrier that you're experiencing that. So that's the idea of better understanding the language of love. So what Gary Chapman tells us in here, there are 5 love languages. I'm going to walk you through them. Here's the thing I want to say up front. I want you to be listening to each love language so that you are able to begin to identify what might be your primary love language. Secondly, I want you to understand that just as in the language of Spanish, there are multiple variations of the dialect. So the Spanish they speak in Cali is slightly different than the Spanish they speak in Mexico, which is different from the Spanish they speak in Spain, which is, you understand my point. So in each love language, there's many dialects of how that language might be spoken. And so that's going to be important. And I'll try to give you multiple variations where that's concerned. So here's the reason why I have this bucket up here, which turned out well for getting your attention today. I want you to imagine that in your life you have a tank or a bucket that is an emotional bucket or an emotional tank. And in order for you to be emotionally, mentally, spiritually full or well, that tank needs to be filled with love. And so as we talk today, I want you to have that visual of what are the ways that we can have our bucket filled so that we can be effective in being able to speak the language of love to other people. Now, to get you focused on that, I put on the table hearts. So everyone needs to have a heart. And you need to have a pen. So if you do not yet have a pen out, I'm going to ask you to pull out a pen. And on your heart, you are going to, you can choose a side. And by the way, you can punch out all the fun little edges later. But on one side, you're going to draw a line directly under, which kind of cuts off the humps of the top of the heart. Right across. So just draw a line straight across. It just kind of cuts off the humps of the heart at the top there. And on the left side, I want you to put the letter P, capital P. Right in the middle, a capital L. And on your right side, a capital A. P, L, and A. Okay, so just a straight line, then P, L, and A. Now, underneath the P, I want you just to very quickly jot down 4 to 5 people closest to you that if I said to you, you want to be effective in communicating love to these people, write me some names. First names, 4 to 5 people at the most, just because of time purposes. You can add more later, but one right after the other in a column underneath P, because the P stands for the people in your life where you want to be effective in speaking love. So 4 to 5 people that you know you want to be effective in speaking love. So I'll know you have at least 2 or 3 down when you look up, and that way I give you the opportunity to do that. Okay, so what I want to do now, I'm going to come back to that because that L is, you're going to be able to have an idea of that later. That's going to be for the language that you think each of those people speak where love is concerned. So that's what that's going to be there, and I'll give you the A here in a moment. Okay, so let's launch into the 5 love languages. Love language number 1 are words of affirmation. Now, words of affirmation are words of encouragement. These are the words that we verbally speak or we write down that help to build people up. It encourages them. And the key thing about words of affirmation as a love language is that they need to be encouraging. And remember, encouraging means to inspire courage. So if we're encouraging someone, we're pushing them to do what maybe they're uncomfortable doing, getting out of that comfort zone. You know, here, Wendy, who's got this painting studio, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to need a lot of encouragement because like me, like my people are stick figures. That's it, okay? And if it's a girl, she's got a triangle for a dress, okay? So when you go into paint and you've never painted before, you need lots of encouragement, right? So we need the words to be encouraging. Also, someone whose love language is words of affirmation, they want kind words. Okay, what do I mean? If your love language is words of affirmation and someone speaks to you in a way that's sarcastic, that's cutting, that's ugly or negative, in other words, they are not kind, that cuts you to the core. It's a quick I don't feel loved right now. You might not verbalize it that way, but it's the feeling that you have. Thirdly, the words need to be humble words. So words of affirmation, you want those words to be humble. See, love makes requests, not demands. People want the option or the choice to love, and ultimately, that's the best way for it to happen because you want love that's genuine, not love that's forced. You don't want someone to say, I love you because I know that's what you expect me to say, because then you know that's not a genuine love. So you want it to be humble. So words of affirmation, words are very significant. You know, in Proverbs, it says that the power of the tongue is great. And so we want to be conscious of our words. So if your language is words of affirmation, words are very important to you. If someone who's close to you in your life's love language is words of affirmation, then you're going to want to think about the words that come out of your mouth and also the tone in which they are spoken. And I'd say as women, especially like if your spouse or you have a son whose love language is words of affirmation, it's not only the words, it's not only the tone, it's the body language, baby. You know what I'm saying? You can put those hands on that hip, you can wag that finger, you can shake that head, and you communicate all kinds of unspoken words that could be challenging for a person whose love language is words of affirmation. Okay, second one is quality time. The second love language is quality time. Now, in quality time, I mean you're giving someone your undivided attention and uninterrupted attention. Okay, so call out some things right now that are distractions that would keep us from having uninterrupted and with no distractions. Give me some things. Oh, cell, television, Facebook. I mean, and now we can have Facebook on the phone. So not only is the phone, it's but Facebook on the phone. So yes, there can be so many distractions. So it's quality, dedicated time. Here, can I just submit to you that life is so short. We're not guaranteed another moment. We're not guaranteed another day. I think if we woke up, not in a morbid sense, and thought, today could be the last day that I live, how much more likely would we be to put our cell phone down and not be looking at it when we're trying to interact with our spouse, our children, our friend, our coworker, someone who needs that time in order to feel loved. So quality time is extremely important. Our youngest son's love language is quality time. So what does that look like? It looks like togetherness. See, with someone who has quality time, it's a central. They want focused attention. Women, face to face. If it's a man with a man, it's shoulder to shoulder. Like, men don't sit and look at each other face to face. But for a woman and a man, do not be surprised that he'll want to sit shoulder to shoulder, not necessarily face to face. That's just the difference between male and female. But it's very important to have togetherness, doing something together. Secondly, quality conversation is important in quality time. Sympathetic dialogue. What's that mean? Where two people can talk about whether it's a common issue or one's issue or not, and there's sympathy there. We have a connection on that point, whether it be the challenges of our job or the challenges of marriage or the challenges of parenting. It's a sympathetic dialogue. Okay, not monologue. So monologue is where I do all the talking all the time, and the other person just kind of sits there passively. That's not quality time. You're getting to do all the talking. So dialogue means both people are interacting. And one of the best ways to get dialogue going is ask questions. Ask questions. How is that going? How are you feeling about that? You look for questions. Who, what, why you probably want to stay away from. Where, when. But asking questions can really help to cultivate a dialogue between you and the person who is needing that quality time. And you've got to listen. Here's the thing. Because of my temperament, I'm a get her done right now, got my list, checking it off, moving on. My thing, can anybody relate to that, or is that just me? Okay, so some of you can relate to that, right? So my tendency would be, they're talking, right? And my tendency would be, okay, I'm formulating in my mind my response, and my natural tendency would be, okay, if you'll just do X, Y, and Z, everything will be okay. Just listen to me, and it's going to be all good. Can anybody relate to that? And how many of you who aren't like that go, that drives me nuts? It's okay. You could say it if it does, but that's the idea. It's listening well without formulating your response in advance. Very, very important. And I love this. He says in the book, do not be a babbling brook or a Dead Sea Scroll. Okay, so the babbling brook is just, you're just kind of all over the map, going nowhere anytime fast, at a lazy pace of moving, and then the Dead Sea Scroll is like, at least some head nods, yes, I hear you. These are all cues that people look for in conversation that you're actually listening, so that's important. And then, of course, under quality time, quality activities, doing something that they really enjoy doing. Third love language, receiving gifts. Okay, so a gift is something you can hold in your hand, and it can be purchased, it can be made, it could be found. And so value isn't the most important thing here in the sense of what we consider to be a monetary value. A gift could be buying a pack of gum and coming home and saying, hey, I thought of you while I was out. That's, for someone who's a receiver of gifts, that's big. A gift could be, a handmade card for Valentine's Day. That's given. So value, we have to make sure that we don't just attach money to gift giving and receiving. Now, of course, if you earn a lot of money and you give a $1 gift, the person might go, okay, that's not really communicating love to me right now. So obviously it would be appropriate based on your ability to use money. But this is what I know. Fred's a giver, I'm a saver, in the sense of gifts is like my 5th lowest love language. His top love language. This is the scenario. So a gift giver is not just about the gift. It's about thinking about the gift, going and finding the gift. It's like wonderfully wrapped and presenting the gift. It is about the moment of when you see the gift. It's all of these aspects, okay? So if that's not you, you're thinking, oh my goodness, that is just a lot of trouble to go through. So I would get my gifts, and I'd be like, how much does this cost? Out of what account did you pay for this? Like, we can't afford this. And he's over there like, what? You know, and I'm telling you, years we kind of had this wrong, and this would be like a real argumentative issue between us until the day we realized, your top love language is gift giving, and I am squashing you every time you give me a gift. This is not good. So gift receiving, remember, it's not just about the money that it takes to buy it. By the way, a great way, that's an important aspect of the love language of receiving gifts is the gift of self. Just you, your presence, your presence. That could be if there's a family member who is very ill, and it's just your presence, you're being there, you're sacrificing your time to be there with them. You don't have to say anything or necessarily do anything. It's the gift of your presence that makes a difference for them. That is a true gift, especially when people realize the shortness of time. So that's the idea on the love language of gifts. Let's do number 4. Okay, so hold on. My teacher and me says you just ate pasta. And now it's going to start turning into sugars, and you're going to start thinking, ah. So first love language was, say it with me, words of affirmation. Let's say it. Words of affirmation. The second love language was quality time. The third love language is receiving gifts. The fourth love language is acts of service. Acts of service. Doing things for someone that you know he or she would like you to do. You're seeking to please by serving, to express your love by doing things for him or her. So this would look like you choose to wash the dishes when you don't like to wash the dishes, or you vacuum the floor when that is the worst thing that you just don't like it, or you take care of laundry. Now you're thinking, but Elizabeth, if I'm a mom or I'm a wife, those are expected. Okay, yes, we could do a marriage lesson later, but my point is when you choose to serve in ways that are outside of what is you like or are normal, you are showing an act of service, okay? And that's very, very important. And see, here's the thing, especially in marriage. So for me, my top love language is acts of service. I enjoy doing laundry. I enjoy taking care of the house. Those are things that why? Because that's my primary love language. And by the way, you speak your primary love language, regardless of what everybody else's love language is. Now, if my family's love language is not acts of service, and none of them are, then they're going, great, Mom, thanks for washing my clothes. And you're thinking, like, where's the love here? You know, where's the appreciation? But that's not their primary love language. So you've got to, that's why it's so important. But for me, forget about a dozen roses. If he washes the dishes, I am like, yes, I love you, okay? That goes farther in our home than roses will ever go in our home. And so that's important, acts of service. You're doing something for someone that's important to them. It's love freely given. And again, if you have a love language of acts of service, it's important to request, not demand. That's very, very, very important. Now, real quickly here, you might get that your love language is acts of service, or your spouse's love language is acts of service if there's criticism about something that you do or don't do. Okay, so if your spouse is critical of the fact that the house is unkept, or the clothes aren't done, or the dishes are dirty, then sometimes those are cues of his love language is acts of service. Why? Because he's going to feel loved when you take care of those things. Does that make sense? Okay, so acts of service. Number 5, the fifth love language is physical touch. And physical touch is very significant. Did you know that they show research that if a child is born and has no physical touch at all, it's much more likely to die more quickly than a child that does receive touch. Touch is very powerful and significant in our lives, not only as infants, but as we grow. Why? Because do you know the skin is the largest organ of our body? We have the most of it exposed. We're sensitive to cold. We're sensitive to breeze. We're sensitive to heat. We're sensitive to touch. We're sensitive to the hair that might tickle our neck, or the tag in the back of your shirt that drives you nuts and you're like, give me a pair of scissors. But where touch is very important. Now, let me clear something up right away. Physical touch is not, this is not about sexuality only. Sexual intimacy is only one of the dialects of physical touch. Is it important? Absolutely. But it's not the only thing. So I need for you to understand, most people are like, I don't want physical touch to be my primary love language, because you think I'm going to be having to, like, you know, do some things all the time that maybe I don't want to do. Okay, so let me just assure you that is one of the dialects of physical touch. So a couple of things I want to tell you about physical touch. There's what I call appropriate for the circumstances. So with your spouse, physical touch can be more than what I call a neutral zone touch. They'll teach you in school, and also police officers go through this as well. There's a neutral zone between the elbow and the shoulder. That's considered neutral zone, where, you know, there's no intent aside from just, that's a neutral zone touch, okay? But with your spouse, it's appropriate. Hold hands, touching the leg, putting your arm around on the shoulder or on the back, or hugging closer than you would someone who's not your spouse. So you want physical touch. If your spouse or you have a child whose love language is physical touch, that's very, very important, especially if yours isn't. And I have a family member who physical touch is like on the bottom of her list. So we go to hug, and she's like this. And I'm like, girl, give me like a real hug, you know? And I mean, I'm not looking for the little fingertip pat, you know? Because physical touch is my secondary love language. So that's important. Physical touch is so significant, where this, by the way, your touch can communicate hate or love. So you want to make sure that you are using that. And remember, God did make your body for touching. So you want to do it appropriately. And then let me just tell you something that this is very important. I try to educate women as much as I can about the hormone oxytocin. Oxytocin is typically produced 2 major times naturally in the body. Upon giving birth, which is what makes a mother want to bond with her child. She wants that closeness with her child. And secondly, oxytocin is most naturally produced right at orgasm. Okay, now I'm not going to talk about that. I do have a training on that, but that's not for today. But here's what I want to tell you. You need to constantly be producing oxytocin in your body. Why? Because it is what allows you to be comfortable being touched. So anytime you hold hands, you touch, you pat on the back, those are all oxytocin producing moments in small little increments. The first 2 that I gave you, that's a huge infusion. But along the way, you need that. So if you're married, it doesn't matter if either of you have physical touch as your love language, you need to be having a steady supply of oxytocin. Why? Because God gave you marriage for intimacy and for closeness. The less you're touched, the less you want to be touched. That's very important. Did you just hear that? The less you're touched as women, the less you want to be touched. And so we need that consistently in our lives. So oxytocin, very powerful hormone that is very important, especially if your love language is physical touch. Okay, what I want you to do is right now on the front of your heart, I want you under the L column, I want you to put what you might guess is the love language for each of the people that you listed. Now, you could just do it in an abbreviation, and if you're not sure, put a question mark. You can do an abbreviation like AW for, or WA for words of affirmation, and if you're not sure, put a question mark. So words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, physical touch. What do you think they are? What's your best guess? Okay, at least get a couple down, and then you can always come back to it. Now what I want you to do is I want you to flip the heart over. And on the back of the heart, I want you to write at the top what you think your love language is. Right now, your top primary love language, what do you believe that it is?
Can you give the choices again?
Absolutely. It's words of affirmation. So words are very significant. Quality time, good conversation, uninterrupted, receiving gifts. I know you love me by what you give me. Acts of service. I know you love me by how you serve me. Or physical touch. I know you love me through the touch that you have or that we have. Hugs, kisses on the cheeks. All right, so here's what I need. I would like to have a general, just kind of idea. So when I call out each love language, if you believe that's your primary love language, I want you to raise your heart up so that we can see it real quickly around the room. So if you believe your primary love language is words of affirmation, raise your heart. Okay, all right, very good. Put your heart down. If you believe it's quality time, raise your heart. Okay, pretty good showing there. If you believe that it is... I just lost my third one. Receiving gifts, raise your heart. Yay, that's okay. So receiving gifts. All right, what about acts of service? Raise your heart. Okay, and finally, physical touch. Raise your heart. Okay, so a pretty good mixture of people. Let me give you real quickly 3 things that you can do to better discover your primary love language in case you're not sure or you're kind of teetering on a couple of them. What does your spouse or loved one do or fail to do that hurts you most deeply? The opposite of what hurts you is probably your love language. So remember I said if the words cut you, the opposite of that would be words of affirmation or your love language, okay? If the lack of being given a gift really hurts you, then the opposite of that would be your love language is receiving gifts, okay? Secondly, what have you most often requested of your spouse or loved ones? In other words, can't you just help around the house? That would be acts of service. Can't you just spend time with me on the couch so that we can chat? That's quality time. The thing you have most often requested is likely the thing that would make you feel most loved. And then thirdly, in what way do you regularly express love to your spouse or loved one? Because your method of expressing love is likely your love language. Why? Because it's your primary language. In the same way that you speak English, because that's your primary language, that's the idea of the language of love. So let me wrap this up for you. The A on your heart, this assignment is for later, but I want to tell you that the A stands for actions. See, it's one thing to come today to lunch and to get to meet some really great women and to have an awesome meal and to learn some things about the language of love, but really what happens is when you leave, you want to put it into action. And so the actions here are, if you don't know, you're not sure of the love language, I'm going to encourage you, go home and speak with your spouse or your children or the people who are closest to you so that you can uncover what their language of love is. And then that could be your first action. Then your second action is work to speak their language, especially if it's different from yours. Okay, and then on the other side where you put your love language, I'm going to encourage you, really write down some things that where this is where or when I feel most loved. Write it on this side of the heart because then you're able to share that with your spouse or your loved ones, your children, so that they are educated on how they can show you love most effectively. Okay, so here's the thing. As you think about those who are closest to you, you want to be effective in being able to do that. Now, we can't demand our love bucket to be filled. But see, here's what happens. Oftentimes when we're dry or we're feeling empty, it's as though every interaction is, will you fill my bucket? you say something to me that will help me to feel love? Will you fill my bucket? Will you come and help me? Will you help me load my car because acts of service helps me to feel? It's as though we are paupers walking around and we're looking for everybody to try to make some kind of contribution to our bucket. Why? Because we feel unloved. And so what I want to submit to you in closing is this, that oftentimes while you're learning to speak the language of love to other people, it's going to take them time to learn how to speak your language, and you still need a bucket that is filled. Why? Because you've got children to show love to. You've got a spouse to show love to. You have friends who need you in their time of crisis. You have a business that demands your attention. If you've got an empty bucket of love, it's really hard to want to give out love. Can we all agree on that? So here is my suggestion. I recommend we go to the ultimate source of love, which is God. Why? Because in His Word He says He has an unlimited source of love. Why? Because He is love. And He has given us examples of what that love looks like, the chief of which is choosing to love the world enough to give His Son Jesus, that He would come. And by the way, Jesus, or God in general in the Word, shows us every example of the love language. He affirms us. Psalm 138, I knew you before I knit you in your mother's womb. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. What wonderful words of affirmation. Quality time. Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God. He's always ready and waiting to have quality time spent with you. He gives us gifts of His presence, of His Word, of Jesus. He has acts of service. He provides for us. He brings people into our life that will help us. Romans 8:26 says, for those who know Him, He gives a Spirit that intercedes on their behalf. And finally, physical touch. Do you know how God physically touches us even though we can't see Him? Through that sunrise or sunset. Through that breeze that brushes through you or touches your skin. Through the cold of the winter or the warmth of the summer. Or seeing the flower that you can feel the petal and feel the softness or the velvetness of it. God touches us physically over and over again. So that's why I encourage you, go to the source daily, because this is what really ultimately it looks like. You can be bone dry on your bucket of love, and you can go to the well of a Heavenly Father who is love, who has an abundance of love, and you can dip deeply and fill yourself day after day after day after day. And when you do that, you will be not only emotionally more healthy, you'll be mentally stronger, but you'll also be greater in spiritual fortitude to face the challenges that come in and out of your life. And here's the best part. You will be an effective speaker of the language of love for all those that God brings into your path. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, ladies.